Chapter 18 of J.S. Bach by Albert Schweitzer, translated by Ernest Newman. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read for you by Chiquito Crasto. Music performed by Jonathan Schofield. Chapter 18 The Musical Offering and the Art of Fugue. Bach wrote the Musical Offering on his return from Potsdam in 1747. He had been received by the king on May 7th. On July 7th he sent him his gift. The composition and the engraving of it had therefore been a matter of less than 2 months. Nor did the engraver even live in Leipzig. It was Schubler of Zella, through whom Bach had already published several clavier works and 6 organ chorales. The copy with the dedication passed from the possession of Princess Amalie into that of the Joachimsthaler Gymnasium, and is now in the Royal Library at Berlin. Bach's dedication runs thus: Most gracious King, allergnädigster König, Eu Majestat wehe hiermit in tiefster Untertanigkeit ein musikalischer Opfer dessen edelster Teil von derselben hohe Hand selbst herrührt, mit einen ehrfurchtsvollen Vergnügen erinnere ich mich noch der ganz besonderen königlichen Gnade, da vor einiger Zeit bei meiner Anwesenheit in Potsdam Ihre Majestat selbst ein Thema zur einer Fuge auf dem Klavier mir vorzuspielen geruheten und zugleich allergnädigst auferlegten, solches alsobald in derselben höchsten Gegenwart auszuführen. Ihre Majestat Befehl zu gehorsamen war meine untertanigste Schuldigkeit. Ich bemerkte aber grad bald, dass wegen mangels nötiger Vorbereitung die Ausführung nicht also geraten wollte, als es ein so treffliches Thema erforderte. Ich fassete demnach den Entschluss und machte mich zugleich anheischig, dieses recht königliche Thema vollkommen auszuarbeiten und sodann der Welt bekannt zu machen. Dieser Vorsatz ist nunmehr nach Vermögen bewerkstelligt worden, und hat keine andere als nur diese untadelhafte Absicht, den Ruhm eines Monarchen, obgleich nur in einem kleinen Punkte, zu verherrlichen, dessen Größe und Stärke, gleichwie in allen Kriegs- und Friedenswissenschaften, also auch besonders in der Musik, jedermann bewundern und verehren muss. Ich erkünne mich dieses untertanigste Bitten hinzuzufügen. Ihre Majestat gerben gegenwärtige weinige Arbeit mit einer gnädigen Aufnahme zu würdigen und derselben allerhöchste königliche Gnade noch Fehlerweit zu gönnen. Ihre Majestat, alleruntertanigste gehorsamten Knechte, der Verfasser, Leipzig, den 7. July, 1747. Most gracious King, to your Majesty I dedicate herewith, in deepest submissiveness, a musical offering, the noblest part of which comes from your own exalted hand. It is with respectful pleasure that I remember still the very special royal favour with which, on my recent visit to Potsdam, your Majesty yourself deigned to give me on the clavier a theme for a fugue, and most graciously imposed on me the command to develop it at once in your Majesty's exalted presence. It was my most humble duty to obey your Majesty's command. I soon observed, however, that owing to the lack of necessary preparation, the working out was not as successful as so excellent a theme demanded. Therefore I resolved, and set to work immediately. to work out fully this truly royal theme, and then make it known to the world. This undertaking has now been accomplished to the best of my ability, and it has no other object than the irreproachable one of exalting, if even in only a small degree, the fame of a monarch, whose greatness and power in all the arts both of war and of peace, but especially in music, every one must admire and honour. I make bold to add this most humble request, that your Majesty will deign to honour this small work with your gracious acceptance, and continue to bestow your most exalted kindly favour on your Majesty's most humble and obedient servant, the author. Leipzig, 7 July 1747. Along with this dedication, however, he sent only the first third of the work, as far as a 6-part Ricercare. The 2 remaining parts he probably sent to the king by the hands of his son. 5 leaves in brown leather binding with gold tooling form the bulk of the portion sent first. The paper is of uncommon fineness and strength. The dedication occupies 2 leaves, then follows the 3-part Ricercare and a canon. Afterwards comes a separate large folio sheet with the canon perpetuus, 5 canones diversi, and the fuga canonica in epidia pente, all upon the thema regium. The Ricercare is rather a fugal 3-part fantasia than a fuga, and contains many surprising things. We ask, for instance, what is the meaning of the triplet passage that enters unmotived at the 31st bar, especially as it is at once abandoned, and twice again emerges only to disappear at once. Why did not Bach open his work with a larger and stricter piano fuga upon the royal theme? The most natural explanation is that he wished to keep to the improvisation that he had made before the monarch. The complete working out of which the dedication speaks must consequently be taken to mean, with regard to the first piece, only a fundamental revision of the fuga actually played on the 7th May. We thus possess one of Bach's improvisations, written down by his own hand. That this is so is further suggested by the unusual freedom and animation of the fuga. It is regrettable that this splendid work, not being included among the clavier compositions, is almost unknown to the majority of players. The royal theme runs thus. Frederick had desired Bach to extemporize a 6-part fuga for him. Bach did so, not however on the king's theme, but on one of his own, giving as his excuse that it was not every theme that lent itself to 6-part treatment. Afterwards he made it a point of honour to work out the king's theme also in 6 parts. Thus originated the Ricercare, which, with 2 supplementary canons, constituted the second consignment. This is not so luxuriously got up as the first. It consists of 4 ordinary leaves held together by a pin. The 6-part Ricercare is Bach's richest piece of fugal writing. In order to allow of a more comprehensive view of it, he wrote it out in score on 6 staves. It is, however, as playable on the piano as any of the fugas of the well-tempered clavichord. From the technical standpoint, the work is unique, but we see in vain in it for the inspiration and the poetry that made the fugas of the well-tempered clavichord so beautiful. No matter how often we play it, it affords no lasting satisfaction. It is a product of Bach's last creative period, in which the contrapuntal technique, though not actually an aim in itself, nevertheless plays the leading part, the invention taking a subordinate place. The musical offering ends with a sonata for flute, violin, and accompanying clavier, to which there is added a canon perpetuus. It is in 4 movements, largo, allegro, andante, allegro. In the largo, the royal theme is merely suggested. In the fuga allegro, it is used as the cantus firmus. The andante harks back to motives from the 3-part Ricercare. The royal theme forms the basis of the finale in this form. Bach thus wrote 2 sonatas for flute, violin, and accompanying clavier, one in the Weimar or the Cothen period, the other 3 years before his death. The difference between the 2 works is enormous. The first belongs to his naive period, when he was solely intent on beauty of sound. When we listen to it, we seem to be wandering by a woodland brook, over meadows that the morning dew has studded with diamonds. The later sonata transports us to great mountain heights, where vegetation ceases and peaks, rising one above the other, stand out in sharp outlines against the blue sky. The beauty of the trio sonata of the musical offering is of this quality. It is profound and severe, without any of the gracious charm that distinguishes the work of the youthful period. We have a manuscript copy of the musical offering, in which the figured bass of the clavier part is written out by Kernberger. This work by a pupil of Bach is invaluable as showing us how simply and correctly the composer wished the figured bass to be worked out. The musical offering contains in all 10 canons, including the fuga canonica at the end of the first part. They are not canons in the ordinary sense of the word, aiming at a definite musical effect, but clever musical charades of the kind that the musicians of that time were fond of propounding to each other. The solutions of the first 6 canons are given by Kernberger in his Kunst des reinen Satzes. In 2 of them, the 4th and the 5th, Bach aims at a certain musical symbolism. Over the 4th, in which the theme is treated in augmentation in contrary motion, he writes, Notulis crescentibus crescat fortuna regis. May the good fortune of the king increase like that of the note values. The 5th, a circle canon ascending through the scale, is inscribed Ascendentec modulatione ascendat glorias regis. And as the modulation ascends, so may it be with the glory of the king. It was the custom to indicate the way to the solution of the canon by showing the notes of the theme on which the other parts had to enter. In the 2 canons that precede the sonata, Bach omits this hint. Quaerendo invenietis, seek and ye shall find, runs his inscription. The first is in 2 parts, the second in 4. While the latter is clear enough, the former permits of several solutions, which were put forward by Agricola, Kernberger, and the Freiburg cantor Fischer, the latter in the Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung of 1806. Besides these, we have 5 other canons by Bach. One is given by the Marburg in his Abhandlung von der Fuge. Another, belonging to the year 1713, was inscribed to an unknown person, probably his Weimar colleague and friend Walter. He paid the same honor, during his Hamburg journey of 1727, to an amateur of that town, a Monsieur Hudemann, who returned the compliment with a poem on Bach, another canon, also given in Marburg's Abhandlung von der Fuge, was inscribed, so Spitta conjectures, to Schmidt, the organist at Zella. The 5th canon is found on Hausmann's picture of Bach, belonging to St. Thomas's School. While engaged on the musical offering, Bach resolved to carry out systematically a plan which he had here undertaken somewhat unsystematically, to write a complete work on a single theme. The new work was to be a practical illustration of the art of fugue. It is an error to say he did not complete the art of fugue. He died before the engraving was completed. Hence the work has come down to us in a seemingly incomplete form. During the last week of Bach's life, none of the elder sons was with his father. After his death, they went on with the engraving in ignorance of what his plan had been. The plates were prepared by Schubler of Zella, to whom Bach had also entrusted the engraving of the musical offering. Perhaps Bach had originally intended to etch the work himself on copper. The 3 pages of the autograph, written in such a way that they could be reproduced directly on the plate, point to this intention. How little Schubler and the sons were acquainted with Bach's design is evident from the fact that they paid no regard to a list of errors carefully made by Bach that has fortunately come down to us. They were not even clear as to the arrangement of the pieces. Moreover, they inserted a simple variant as a new piece. Fugue number 14 is identical with Fugue number 10, except that it lacks the first 22 bars. Rust thinks that the whole style of the edition indicates that none of the elder sons had anything to do with it. That is not so. They merely attended to it in a hurry. Among Bach's papers was found also a large fugue upon 3 themes, at which he had worked until the last without finishing it. Emmanuel and Friedemann thought it had been intended for the art of fugue, and printed it there, unfinished as it was. In order, however, that the work might not end in this incomplete way, they added the organ chorale, Wenn wir in höchsten Noten sind, which Bach had dictated to Altnikol. No one can say whether it had really been his intention to end the art of fugue with these 2 works. In a sense they belong to it, in another sense not. They have nothing to do with the specimen fugues, for they are not based on the same subject. On the other hand, they are so skilfully worked out. See, for example, Bach's constant manipulation of the theme in inversion in the organ chorale, that he may well have written them with a view to their forming an appendix to the art of fugue. The three themes of the unfinished fugue run thus. The three separate fugues on these themes are completed. Bach is just about to combine them at the point where the manuscript breaks off. The theme of the last fugue spells Bach's name. In the Weimar days, Bach had remarked to his colleague Walther upon the peculiarity of the four letters of his name as accounting for the musical aptitudes of the Bach family. Walther mentions this at the end of the meagre little article that he devotes to his former friend in his musical dictionary, 1732. And expressly says that the remark came from Herr Kapellmeister Bach himself. This makes it all the more curious that Bach should have waited until the last year of his life before making a fugue on this interesting theme. Friedemann, when questioned by Forkel upon this point, said positively that his father had never written any fugue but this upon the family name. The various fugues on BACH that claims to have been composed by Johann Sebastian therefore cannot be his. There are four of these. One of them, if not like Bach, is not uninteresting. Spitta tries to preserve the ascription of at least two of these fugues. They are not printed in the BG edition. However, even among the doubtful works, only the themes are given. The theme BACH is a favorite one with the moderns. Liszt and Schumann have written fugues upon it. In Reger's music, we fancy we can often detect it, even where it is not expressly indicated. Nor must we forget Barblin's accomplished organ Passacaglia on BACH. The Art of Fugue was published some months after Bach's death at the price of 4 thalers. It had, however, no sale then, at Emmanuel's request. Marburg, 1718 to 1795, wrote a preface to it, and the work was reissued with a new cover and the recommendation of the celebrated Theoretician at the Leipzig Easter Fair of 1752. Its worth was recognized, Mattheson praised it warmly, but still it did not sell. In 1756, Emmanuel had sold barely 30 copies. The 130 thalers received did not cover the cost, and the disappointed son sold the plates of his father's last work for the value of the metal. Such was the fate of the Art of Fugue. In his biography, Forkel says indignantly, "If a work of this kind, by so exceedingly famous a man as Bach, had appeared anywhere but in Germany, perhaps 10 fine editions would have been taken up out of pure patriotism. In Germany, there were not sold even enough copies to pay for the copper plates and the engraving." Perhaps Forkel's exasperation with his countrymen carries him too far. It was not the fault of individuals, but of the epoch, that the great cantor's work had no success. Music had struck into new paths that led it away from the fugal style, and those who were still interested in it were not fugue masters, but fugue schoolmasters, and incompetent to understand the true Bach, however much they swore by him. We get this impression even from Marburg's preface, which partly consists of only a moderately clever polemic against the new tendency that refuses to recognize the fugue as the vital cornerstone of music. The Art of Fugue consists of 14 fugues and 4 canons on the theme. The theme cannot strictly be called interesting. It is not a stroke of genius, but has plainly been made with an eye to its manifold workableness and capacity for inversion. Nevertheless, it grows upon us after repeated hearings. It introduces us to a still and serious world, deserted and rigid, without color, without light, without motion. It does not gladden, does not distract, yet we cannot break away from it. We get the same impression from the first 4 fugues that deal with the theme itself and its inversion. With the 5th fugue, however, the monotony of the theme is broken. The regular pace of the first 4 notes becomes more varied rhythmically. The theme acquires a grave movement. From the 8th fugue onwards, it becomes more and more animated, until in the 11th it assumes the following form. All the possible fugue types, including those of which Bach himself had never made use, are represented in the art of fugue. We do not know which to wonder at most, that all these combinations could be devised by one mind, or that, in spite of the ingenuity of it all, the parts always flow along as naturally and freely as if the way were not prescribed for them by this or that purely technical necessity. His purpose in this work being a purely theoretical one, Bach writes the fugues out in score and calls them counterpoints. The last four fugues are grouped in pairs, each of a pair being note for note an exact inversion of the other, as if we were reading it in a mirror. They are in three parts. The negative stands immediately under the positive. Here again Bach soars playfully above every technical difficulty. The pieces are bright and animated from beginning to end, as if it were a pure accident that one of them happened to be the reflection of the other. Bach himself must have felt the purest pride in them. He arranged the last pair for two claviers, adding a fourth obbligato part so that both instruments should be fully occupied. In this form, the last two pieces of the art of fugue were given as a supplement, and when the work was republished in the 19th century, this part of it was fastened on by the pianists and soon became the most popular of all. The theme runs thus. End of chapter 18. Read for you by Chiquito Crasto. Music performed from the source text available in the public domain by Jonathan Schofield, Birmingham, Alabama. End of J.S. Bach by Albert Schweitzer, translated by Ernest Newman.